This is Radio Times here on WHYY in Philadelphia. I'm Marty Moss-Cohen. It's not unusual for children to be picky eaters or for them to go through a phase when they love certain foods or hate certain foods, and most of them will outgrow that. But some adults have a very narrow preference for foods, and we're talking about who these people are, how foods look to them, and how it affects them socially as well. Talking about all of this with Bob Krause and Abigail Nateshon, and taking calls at 1-888-477-9499. Bob, I know you wanted to say something to Sean, who called us right before the break.
Yeah, Sean is obviously a foodie who can eat anything, and I'm sure he takes great pride in the foods that he makes for people, and he has seen occasions where he can make something so good that a persnickety eater might like it, but he's probably also of the attitude of, well, if they just try my food, they'll like it, and it's just, they're spoiled, and I've talked about that before. And I don't care how he's going to cook some of his dishes, nothing he's got there is going to appeal to me. And I should also point out that I really never asked to be this way.
Right.
I would change if I really could, and nobody wants to get the kind of attention that this gets, and we're certainly not doing it for attention. And it is, as Abigail mentioned, it can be genetic, and it does run through families.
Was it in your family, Bob?
My father had some minor eating issues, and I heard stories about two uncles that I had who were rather similar to the way I was.
But the thought of, and I don't mean to belabor this, but I'm picking up on what Sean said, but the idea that someone could make something that they believe would taste really good to you, it just doesn't resonate with you, Bob?
No, it wouldn't. It would be the dish. Whether the dish is made extremely well or so-so, it's going to look the same to me.
Because Abigail, and it's interesting, and I love the word persnickety, sort of fussy eaters versus eaters that really have an aversion to certain foods.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we do see in more traditional clinical eating disorders that there are people who have different approaches to food, different rituals regarding food, and certainly different preferences, but generally based on caloric intake and not on the sensory experience on the tongue, in the body.
Let me get back to our callers. Sean, thanks for the call. Let me see what looks like Francis from Old City has to say. And Francis, go ahead. You're on Radio Times.
Hi.
I
wouldn't say that I'm a picky eater, but I'm selective, and I'm a father of two young boys. And I'm wondering if what I'm doing to my son, eat certain things and making nice games out of it, but eventually making sure they get their fruits and veggies, is going to have any adverse effects on them later on in life. My youngest son, when he was 2 years old, had a stomach bug and just stopped eating anything green at all. And by cleverly hiding it in the mashed potatoes and doing different tricks, he's back on it. But I noticed that he gags every now and again on a banana and things like that. And I'm just wondering, as a parent, what should you do and shouldn't you do so at a young age your children are set to grow up okay?
Well, you're a good parent, Francis. Let me give Abigail Nateshon a chance to weigh in on that, and we'll give Bob Krause a chance as well. Abigail, what should he do?
I think there's a lot to the idea of getting good nutrition into a child, and no matter what it takes. If you can make a protein shake, if you can put things in that child needs nutritionally, aside from supplements and vitamins, I say more power to you. But I do think in some instances, again, having to do with extremes, that child is going to notice and not be able to continue on such a program, or the child may begin to become suspicious and food phobic. I think, in terms of dealing with kids, the most important thing is for parents to trust their instincts, to trust what they see, and I'm saying this harshly because I know that so many parents have very difficult interactions with pediatricians who don't recognize that a problem exists.
Sure.
They will say not to be concerned, the child will outgrow it, when the child won't. My sense is that it's important to avoid coercive behaviors at home or tense environments around eating. Certainly, as Bob was saying, never to threaten to starve a child unless he's willing to eat. I would certainly expose a child to a wide variety of foods to help overcome their fears, and to introduce foods early and often, and varied foods, and especially, if possible, before the age of 3. And it's been noted. Yes, go ahead.
Let me just, only because we got a lot of callers here, and I want to give Bob Krause a chance to weigh in on that as well. And what I heard from our caller, Bob, was he's trying to be playful, make food fun, but nonetheless he clearly has some concerns and is hiding certain foods in other foods that are more palatable.
Well, first of all, everything that Abby just told you is absolutely correct. And the only thing I can say about hiding food in other foods, you could end up creating a trust issue with your child where they'll never trust any food that you hand them in the future, and they'll pick through it, and they'll assume there's something in there. So that may work to some degree, but you could cause other problems down the road.
Francis, thanks for the call. Let's see what looks like Kathy from Hunterdon County has to say. And Kathy, go ahead, your Radio Times.
Excuse me.
Are you okay there, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
Go ahead.
Having been a picky eater as a child, and as an adult, excuse me, I am no longer a picky eater. Mm-hmm. I've had this theory, and I don't know if it's true, that I've been told that you have the same amount of taste buds as a child that you do as an adult, that you're born with all the taste buds that you're ever going to have. I always wondered if having all those taste buds clustered together on a tiny tongue and then spread out over a large tongue, if maybe as a child flavors are more intense because it's in such a small area I'm going
to let you take care of your voice there, but let me give Abigail Nateshon a chance to weigh in on that. Does that make sense to you, Abigail?
It's an interesting theory. Mm-hmm. I can't respond about that theory in particular, but I will say that there are certain things that we know about the childhood taste buds, and we know that a tolerance for bitterness generally comes in later as children grow older. So some things do change and will change. And I think it's marvelous that she has outgrown this, and there's a part of me that wonders if maybe this had been about food preference with this young woman and not necessarily the selective eating disorder that we're talking about today.
Kathy, thanks for the call to Radio Times. You can call as well, 1-888-477-9499. I guess, Bob, I'm using the word out here, but I guess you're out about your eating preferences. Has that been a relief for you?
It's kind of liberating because I go around and I don't have to worry about people inviting me to their house for dinner or a party, or if I do come, nobody pays much attention to me, and I can just be myself and not be all self-conscious about it.
Does your family understand? I don't know if you mentioned a daughter, but does your family understand your condition?
For the most part, although we're spread out all over the country, so we seldom, if ever, get together for the holidays. I've got children that live in Texas, and I'm in Virginia, and my parents have passed away long ago.
Did it or does it affect social situations at work, for instance, for you?
For me, no, because I am the owner of the company, so if they want to have a potluck or something, they don't worry about inviting me.
But you've had other occupations, though, before this one, right? You were in the Navy for a while.
I was in the Navy for about 13 years, and that was the Great Deception. I lived off of breakfast for most of those years when I was in a deployed type situation, and would skip the other 2 meals a day most of the time, and it was like the Great Deception.
And I guess 'cause you were good at hiding what you were eating or pretending to be eating something else?
Well, I can look almost normal at breakfast. I can go and get some bacon, some toast, get a bowl of cereal, drink a glass of milk, and fill up pretty good for the rest of the day. And nobody notices that. But say if you try to go to one of the other meals and you eat little or nothing, then that's going to stand out. So tended to avoid other meals during the day.
Abigail, the caller talking about taste buds made me think of older people, and I wonder whether older people's taste buds change. They seem to indicate that the food doesn't taste quite the way it did when they were younger. Have you looked at that, and do older people sometimes develop some of these habits we've been talking about?
I would imagine so, but I would say that for people who are older, there may be some other kinds of biological problems that come with it. And one of the things I want to mention, as long as we're talking about the tongue and taste buds, is that it would be important for people to be aware that the side of the tongue, rather than the tip, is less sensitive to strange new tastes, and it's probably the best place to introduce new foods, whether you are an adult or a child.
Well, that's good to know. Let me get Dan from, looks like Mount Laurel, to join us on Radio Times. And Dan, go ahead. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm 69. Suddenly, at about age 65, I developed what now you've clarified for me is a selective eating disorder.
Oh, interesting.
It's as though each meal is an uphill challenge. I don't know if this is atypical, that you live to be 65, eating things and relishing different foods, and then suddenly foods that you lived for, you gag literally at the thought. I'm sitting at the table often afraid I'm going to regurgitate just because I'm trying to swallow something. Now, just for consideration, I know we're short for time.
Sure.
I don't know if there's a comorbidity. I've had pretty much a lifelong bipolar disorder and a general anxiety disorder, but it never manifested itself in terms of food aversion.
Well, Dan, I'm really glad you called, and I want to give both of our guests a chance to weigh in. But Abigail, let me start with you. What are your thoughts?
It's a fascinating question, and it's very much a possibility, and it's something that I think that there should be more research about. I do think that these have to do with gene clusters, and I think that anxiety and depression may accompany these problems. So, but also, just for the sake of just thinking about this as broadly as possible, sometimes psychological crises or problems that happen in a person's life can trigger the onset of what looks like selective eating disorder. And I'm thinking of a 12-year-old boy who watched a friend of his choke on a pretzel or something, and then he went into a state of not being able to eat anything that was hard for a long time and needed to be supplemented and given anti-anxiety medications. So, but it was a temporary thing. But I think it would be worth your while to consult with a medical doctor and get some opinions.
Bob Krause, you want to add to that?
I agree with Abigail, and sounds like there may be underlying medical issues from where I'm sitting. And can I just add one thing about taste? There's 3 basic tasters in this world, people who have very little taste, normal tasters, and super tasters. And your people that like to eat just about anything will generally be in the first class where they don't have a real great taste in their mouth. Their ability to taste is limited. So everything will taste good to them, and they like hot, spicy things. People that are super tasters start getting into the group that I have, because things that you think are mild and everything could just send us going crazy.
Let me ask you about, and perhaps Abigail, I can toss this to you. I'm thinking about the parental anxiety that a parent might have if they have a child that they see is a fussy eater or maybe even a picky eater. But sometimes that parental anxiety can exacerbate the situation. What advice do you have to parents that might be worried, but they don't want to be overly worried about a child that doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in food?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because so many parents are discouraged from thinking further about it by pediatricians, and I do want to say that they need to trust what they see, and I think that they need to take charge in a way that is not confrontational and that's going to be a battlefield. They need to get help. They need to go for consultation about parenting their children and their whole families at mealtime, because it can become a real crisis situation for an entire family. And the child has to be seen as not an obstinate, stubborn child, but as a child who's suffering and as a child who needs special help. There are lots of different therapies that child can benefit from. And I don't know if we really have time, but Okay, then
No, I'm sorry. The clock.
Okay.
The clock really drives my life here.
Okay.
But Bob, I'm wondering also about the people that are part of your group about whether a lot of this comes back to, and I'm not saying this is the reason for it, but that mealtime was a tug of war in their childhood growing up.
The people that make it into adulthood are generally people that were destined to do that because of genetic reasons, or they may have a physiological problem. Normal medical advice says most picky-eating children will grow out of it, but there are some that make it all the way into adulthood, and they make it that way because there's something else going on.
Well, on that note, my thanks to both of you. Bob Krause, thanks for joining us today on Radio Times.
Oh, great talking to you.
Nice talking to you as well. And Abigail Nateshon, thank you for joining us as well.
Well, I'm happy to have been here. I do want to say that on my website there is a section that is for parents and patients.
Fair enough.
And that would be very educational and very helpful for people. Oh. There are 10 articles to be found there.
And that's Abigail Nateshon. You can Google her and find that information. A psychotherapist specializing in the treatment of eating disorders. Bob Krause, founder of a website and a support group called pickyeatingadults.com. Go to WHYY.org/Radio Times to find out much more about this program. Kevin Griffin